this here. So this is where you'll be standing. If anyone pops in online, we'll just see their faces come up.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna put this right here. So now you just press down to advance it.
Okay.
So you're good to go.
Terrific. Yep.
There
Okay.
it is.
I always like to start by finding out how much you know already. I'm sure there's a varied amount of experience in the room. So we're going to start with a fundraising quiz that is on your tables. Make sure everybody's got one. You share. This is from the Institute of Transformational Philanthropy. We go. Question number 1. You can secure gifts, big gifts, by writing letters. True or false? What do you feel is a big gift when you say true? $100,000. So you think you could write someone a letter and they would give you $100,000?
On their radar, they were high.
I agree if you're talking about small dollar amounts, but I will respectfully disagree when you're talking about large dollar amounts. Especially with, the internet, people are always Googling nonprofits. They have a lot of options. They can look up your history, your financials, all very easily. And I would say that the answer to this is false. You may get some $100 checks. You might get a $500 check or a $20 check. But the key word here is big gifts. And I would say those come from more one-on-one relationships, definitely.
So what's your standard for a big gift? And what if it's an individual? What do you consider a big gift for an individual? What do you consider a big gift for a corporation?
I would say for an individual, $500 is a big gift. Now, if someone's known you a long time and they see you in community, they've been to your events, you might get a $500 check. But I would say out of the blue, no. Corporations usually have a process they want you to go through, some sort of paperwork to fill out. I've seen a few $500 checks, but when I say big gifts, I mean multi-year, $25,000 to $100,000 gifts. Okay.
I think the key here is the writing letters.
Yeah. Big gifts don't come from writing letters. They come from personal relationships. Question number 2, people dislike giving.
False.
You're correct. The number 1 reason people say they don't give is because they were not asked. They like to give. I think all of us have given gifts of various kinds, and it makes you feel good. You get as much or more out of it than the person or place you give the gift to. So you're correct. Number 3, the state of the economy is key to fundraising. True or false?
I like false as an answer.
I'd say true.
You'd say true?
I would.
I hope it's false.
The answer is false. Charitable giving remains at about 2% of gross domestic product every year. So up or down, and I think we all know that, for example, during the period of COVID pandemic, there was a lot more giving that happened, even though there were a lot of strains on the economy. So don't let someone tell you, well, the market's down, so I'm not giving. That's not the real reason, because there's a lot of research and tracking out there now, and that's not true. Development staff, in other words, people that work at nonprofits and their job is raising money, because it's their job, are more effective in asking for gifts than volunteers. False. Everybody agrees? You're correct. If there aren't volunteers, maybe the staff are more effective because those are the only ones that are doing it. But peer-to-peer fundraising is one of the best ways to raise money. If I give to a cause and you're a friend or a neighbor or an acquaintance and I come to you and say, I support it, you should support it, that's more effective than someone who, you know, it's their job, they're getting paid to make the ask. Number 5, not everyone on the board of directors has to be involved in fundraising. True or false?
I like false, that's the answer. I don't know if that's actually the case.
The correct answer is false. Now, I agree that not every person feels comfortable making an ask, but fundraising has a lot of different components. If you're keeping a spreadsheet that shows who you've asked, who gave, and how much, and what the totals are, you're helping with fundraising, even though you're not making an ask. Or if you're doing research online as to who you can ask or what grants are out there, you're helping with fundraising. So there's lots of different roles that you can play throughout this process. Number 6, fundraising is a lot easier once you get the hang of it.
True.
Well, according to these folks, the answer is false. Fundraising evolves over time, and you may have a capital campaign where before you were just asking for annual gifts, or you begin a planned giving program where before you have not asked for gifts from estates and wills and after people pass away. And having done it as long as I have, I would say some of it is a bit easier and some of it remains difficult. Pardon me?
Yeah.
Well, these folks that made the quiz say the answer is false. But the biggest gift I ever got, which was $10 million, took me 5 years. So that I would say was not easy, right? Okay. Number 7, with so many causes raising money, the wells of philanthropy will soon go dry. True or false? Very, very good. That is true. Number 8, asking once a year is enough. True or false? You're right. You're right. There are more than 1.3 million nonprofits in the United States.
How many?
1.3 million. Yeah, that's a lot of nonprofits, right? Think about 50 states, 1.3 million, do the math, figure out how many there are on average in every state. Number 10, people will give you money because yours is a good cause.
False.
False. You're right. They need to know more. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. So thank you, you did really well. So today I want to cover, with you to analyze where you are in your starting point as far as fundraising goes. What have you done? What have you not done? What are you tracking? What do you want to do? What are your goals? And how are you going about that? It's really great if you can track who is giving. I talk to a lot of nonprofits who don't even have lists or don't have complete lists of who's given to them, even over the last 3 to 5 years. They had a volunteer tracking, no one, wrote it down, or it's been lost or what have you. How much are they giving? Is Angie giving you $25 a year every single year, or did she do 50 and now she's doing 25? Those kinds of things. Who's getting the money? The charitable gifts in the United States. Is it kids? Is it animals? Who's getting the bulk of the charitable dollars? I'm going to cover some of the common fundraising terms. You may have heard them. I assume there were a lot of different levels of experience in the room, so I am going to cover some of the basics. We have Rebecca Brewer online. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca.
There's another, seems like another person, or is that Chris? Okay, we'll keep going.
Rebecca's calling in from Winkleman.
Hello, Winkleman. Some of the elements of a fundraising plan. because I think you should have a plan and work your plan. It's the best way to move ahead and also track where you've been. And then another key element to all of this is telling your story. And there's a lot of ways to tell your story. You could do it with the website, you could do it with the newsletter, but I'm going to talk to you today about you as an individual and how you tell your own story. And I have a little exercise that was originally designed by the folks at Harvard University. And if you look at their foundation, they are quite successful at raising money. But it has to do with storytelling as an individual, which is really important. So if you would, if you feel comfortable, share with me right now where you are on some of these points. Are you collecting data of any kind? When the gifts come in, who's giving, you're keeping lists and analyzing the information a little bit?
Our information's kind of everywhere. Like, we don't have like the one spot that we can see it all. We can pull it from different places.
So does that mean different people are tracking different things?
No, it's just like it comes in from different places, and so depending on where it comes from, it's tracked somewhere.
Like
based
your
on its
Facebook
source.
analytics are on Facebook?
Yeah, or
Okay.
like, we're getting gifts from individual donors in the mail, and then we're getting gifts from foundations a different way. We get online donations versus checks sometimes. So yeah, all that stuff is tracked, but there's not one single place for them.
Be lovely if there was.
Yes.
Anybody that was the library have access or another database?
I don't
You don't, okay.
know. Most of our funding comes from the county. I was hoping that I could do something grant writing in the future. I recently found out that any kind of large donations would have to funnel through the town because we are not.
Separate organization, right?
And so I have also, that being said, I have found that people who are wanting to donate are kind of put off by that because they wanted to go directly to the library and not funnel through the town. So that's a big hurdle that I have right now, and I would have to get, be a nonprofit and get a taxpayer ID number and bank account and all of those things before I could start doing these types of fundraising.
Some libraries have the Friends of Superior Library, and they do form a separate nonprofit so that they can do fundraising, and they have their own donor lists and their own tracking. Anybody using Excel? That's very common. You're using Excel, but not for everything all in one place. Okay.
Hi
Either-
there, sorry to join late. Can
Hello,
you hear me okay?
yes, what's your name?
My name is Rebecca. Let's see, you can't see me. Hold on one second. I was getting calls and trying to join.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, and how are you tracking your data or collecting your data about gifts?
I haven't received any yet. I use QuickBooks, and so that's where all of our finances are run. I own a small nonprofit private school in Winkleman, and so the students pay tuition through the Empowerment Scholarship account, and that's how we are funded right now. So that's the only income that we have.
Okay, and do you have your chart of accounts set up in QuickBooks to track various types of gifts? Good for you.
We do, yeah.
Yeah, maybe she could do a workshop and help folks.
Right.
Because
Yeah,
QuickBooks
ours
is-
in QuickBooks, but doesn't give the same level of information. It's like, a spreadsheet with contact information and other things, but
Mhm.
all AR.
Okay. And one of the keys is how you set up that chart of accounts so that when someone enters the information, you could say event income or tuition income or book sale income. for a library. Or for a church, it would be Christmas party income or whatever it is. So before you do set up your data, you need to think through and leave space for different types of things you want to track. Now, I know QuickBooks, goes month to month and year to year, but it is nice to be able to see the giving over a period of at least 3 years, if you can. And that takes a volunteer, maybe one of those folks we talked about a minute ago that don't want to stand in front of the crowd and say, will you help us by giving money, but they're going to keep your spreadsheet or do your QuickBooks for you. So are you noticing when you have a new donor? Do you have a category for new donor?
No, I think, we're kind of in the same boat, Chris, if we have this collected information. That it's kind of- we don't
Okay,
have it formulated in particular format. It's a matter of documenting it.
okay. So it's more about bookkeeping than
Yeah.
fundraising. Okay. Well, I encourage you to think about finding a person who loves to fool with data and massage data and, keep track of those kinds of things. And there are some folks who love numbers and who love data entry and, are willing to do that. So I encourage you to try to find that.
Do you recommend something outside of QuickBooks, like just creating a sophisticated spreadsheet or some kind of donor management tool after you get to a certain size, or what do you recommend there?
Yeah, the donor management tools cost money. There are some that are free, but they only allow you, for example, up to 500 donors. So if you grow, then you have to start over with a paid version. If you're great with a spreadsheet, that may be sufficient for you, but it's really nice to be able to send a card and log that you sent Angie a birthday card, because Angie's a donor. How often are we contacting people? How often are they giving? What events do they come to? That kind of thing. Yes.
I had different police departments, and what I did was I set up in Excel sheets, and they were tied to one spreadsheet, and I could click on the city, and it would give me, that page, then I do my notes, document together, and it functioned well for me, and, but of course, you get larger, and
Right, a customer tracking software. I've used several of them, and I've also used Excel. My issue was with Excel is that every time they did an update, I felt like I had to relearn it. It's like, where did the tab go?
Like you're saying about like when I did what or who there's no logging of activity there.
No, but you could put, contact date and put a date
You
in.
got a column that says,
Oh.
I did this thing, but it's not like,
Right,
it's not like a CRM.
no,
It's not like a donor management.
no.
that cost.
And you have to learn it. And learn the updates and that sort of thing. So that's for larger nonprofits or folks that have a ton of volunteers. Notice the item that says lost donors. This has always surprised me. Is that you lose 65% of your donors after the first year. And usually it's because either they didn't get a thank you or you didn't stay in touch with them long enough. Sometimes it's episodic, like when you had the fires and the floods, maybe somebody just wanted to give to, recovery from the fire. But generally speaking, it's easier to keep the donors you have than to try to get new ones. So to spend time preventing the loss of donors is really important. And there's lots of methods that you can use. I have some of them up on the screen. And I've noticed that many of them depend on the age of your donors. Like, my son is 34. He doesn't want an email. He either wants a text, or some other method online. He wants to be able to give online. He'll research you online, all of it. Now, my mom gives to charity, but she doesn't even use her cell phone. So you need to send her a letter in the mail. So knowing how old your donor is, whether or not they have email, how active they are on the internet. You don't want to send them a text to invite them to an event or an email to invite them to an event if they don't read their email or they have trouble opening attachments to email. You know, I have an old donor who doesn't have Word. So you'd always have to send him a PDF of things. But that was just, and he was stubborn about it. He didn't want to for some reason. So knowing how to talk to your donors is really important too. Young people love texts. Just text me. But it's harder, you know, in some circumstances to do a group text. You know, if you've got 50 people or more, it's hard to see who's RSVPing and stuff like that. But keep in mind all the different ways and try to match up your methods with your donors. Now, if you have a mix, you might need to do all of it. It just depends. I also had a situation when I lived in another town in Arizona where the post office was very challenging. People would say, I sent a check, and we would say, we didn't get it. And, you know, they'd say, well, it's not been cashed. And I'd say, well, we still didn't get it. And then we'd get a notice saying, you have mail in a bin from your post office box, and we'd get the bin, and some of the mail was 4 months old. So if you know, if you're far from a post office or there's an issue, then you might want to think of that too.
Try to make sure Rebecca can see the screen.
Okay.
Okay, we should be good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Better? Good. Good. Okay. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Giving USA. I was using my daughter's MacBook and I had trouble dropping in the most current slide, but I can tell you about this study. It's been going on since 1956, and it looks at tax returns and other records of charitable giving in the United States. Now, public charity is a 501c3. Chambers of Commerce are usually C6s. They're not a public charity, and you don't get a tax deduction for giving to your chamber or your Rotary Club. Or, you know, the ones that serve their members are not eligible. So we're talking about public charities. And this study tracks giving to public charities every year. This is older, but the numbers don't change much from year to year. This is the one I had trouble dropping in the new slide. Most people feel that the way for nonprofits to go is to write grants. That would be like Walmart grants or whoever. They want to write, you know, I'm not talking about state and federal grants, but I'm talking about business contributions. They want to walk around and talk to businesses and get a check from the business, or they want to write grants to businesses. This study every single year shows that the vast majority of all gifts to charities and nonprofits come from individuals. If you look at this chart will be the same. Look, 69% from individuals, 324.1 billion. This one is 67%. So year to year changes a percent or two, but these are standard and common. When you look at bequests, that's a gift from someone's will. Well, that's an individual too. So you've got to take the 69% and add 9%, you're at 78%. Then you look at foundations. Many foundations are family foundations. So those are individuals too. A community foundation, for example, where I worked, is not in that group. But if you think about the foundations that have given you money, some of them are likely to be private. Right? I mean, even if you think about the Walton Foundation, which is Walmart, but it's a family-owned foundation. So those are individuals too. So you're already at 78%, and then you've got to take some of the foundations, because those are individuals too. And see the vast majority is triggered by individuals. And corporations are 4%. Yeah, 2 years later, they're still at 4%. You can write grants and you can ask from the local car dealership, the local grocery store for that corporate check, business check. But where it's at is people. Me, you, your friends, individuals. So keep that in mind, because sometimes that's daunting for people. It's like, oh, that seems like a bigger list. It seems like it's harder. But if you want to go for the bucks, that's where it's at. And then these don't change much from year to year either. Who's getting the money? We talked about that. Well, look, number one is religion there. That's your church. Some churches have colleges. There are private Catholic colleges, that kind of thing. But these are public. So churches can be 501c3s. They're getting 28% of the money. In this one, they're getting 27%. And it used to be in the 30s. Actually, giving to religion is slowly, year by year, falling. Education. Well, we all know that universities are really good at fundraising and they have a lot of staff. But also people believe in kids. So when you think about a scholarship, you're talking about a kid that's going to college. That's an easy sell. Anything that involves kids, plus they understand how it works. The money goes in, it goes for tuition and books, those kinds of things. But given that these numbers are in billions, there's room for everybody. The environment is only at 3% there. It's still at 3% 2 years later, but that's still over $16 billion. There's lots of charitable money, and these are people giving to charities. Here we have a lot of the public society benefit organizations in the room. Well, you're getting 10%. Only 5% going overseas. Culture also has a lower percent, but I think some of that has to do with storytelling and the methods that they're using. I talked about this slide a little bit already. You see how since 1980, we've been around 2% of gross domestic product. Now we know that in the 80s, the stock market rose significantly, tremendously. People were earning 24% on their stock portfolios. That giving is still just under 2% of GDP, right? 2008, when we had the finance crisis, it did drop a little bit, but only 0.3%. So it hovers right around the same amount over time. And this is adjusted for inflation too. So it's in current dollars. We're not talking about the value of money 20, 40 years ago. Any questions on that before we go into some of the terminology? Okay, these are common terms. If you work with development staff at various places, they use these terms all the time. I mean, an annual gift is pretty self-explanatory. It's a gift that's given every year. I give money to, the animal shelter once a year. A major gift.
Do one time, large sum.
Larger sum of money. In the industry, so to speak, a major gift is considered to be 10 times your annual gift. So if I give you $100 a year, if you're asking me for a major gift, that would be $1,000. Okay, that's whatever if your average gift is $5, 10 times 5 is 50. That may be a major gift for you, depending on how young your organization is, what you're raising money for, etc. I have seen food banks that say, $5 buys 2 meals or 3 meals for a family. So it just depends on your organization and where you're at. So a planned gift. Does anybody know what that is? when people die. A planned gift is not one I plan to give you in November. A planned gift is a gift from my will or my estate. It requires some sort of legal documentation. I have to name the nonprofit as a beneficiary. I have to have a will. I can't just, I mean, in Arizona, oral wills and handwritten wills can be validated in court, but generally, if I'm gonna leave you my stock, my house, my jewelry, whatever, it needs to be in writing somewhere, and my attorney, needs to know about it. It's in a document somewhere. My life insurance, I have to make you a beneficiary through my agent, right? So that's a planned gift. A blended gift, I won't have you guess on that. It's a combination of those. Sometimes people will say, well, I can't give you the $1,000 now. But maybe later, when they pass, or at some time in their life, they get an inheritance, maybe then they could give you one. So a blended gift is a gift now, but also a promise of a gift later. Yes,
Does that include, gifts such as, donating something to the organization, whether it be clothing or literature, something that you're trying to,
in kind,
is that different than the brand gift?
you could have an in-kind gift that is really part of a blended gift. Clothing has such a low value, generally, you wouldn't think of it, but I do know of a company, there was a school that when it rained, their whole playground would get too wet and the kids couldn't go outside. And they called me asking me to help with that. It needed to be regraded and different things done, drainage, etc. And I didn't have any resources for them, but I called, it happened to be FMI. And I knew the local site manager and I said, got any ideas? Anybody that owns a backhoe? How can we help? The kids can't go outside. And he's like, you know what? My guys aren't doing anything. We'll go down there. And they graded it. It was in Naka, Arizona. That was a big in-kind gift, right? Bulldozers, graders, the whole bit. So I would count something of a higher value there, but you can track in-kind gifts. Some state and federal grants allow you to use that as part of your match. So tracking everything is good. You never know. Your annual campaign relates to your annual gift. This is good timing because fall and right before Christmas is a common time for nonprofits to do an annual campaign. You are competing with a lot of other people, but that is very common. I mean, I've tried doing it in October instead of December. I've tried doing it before tax time instead of in December. Because people are thinking more about taxes right before April 15th, or they just paid their taxes and they're like, never again. So your annual campaign can really be anytime. If you're a school, maybe you want the money before school starts in August, right? You might do something in the summer. Capital campaign, pretty self-explanatory. It's bricks and mortar, equipment, one-time purchases. And some funders, some individuals like buying stuff. I'm sure you've experienced that, Chris, where they want to give you the TV, they'll do that, but they don't necessarily want to give you the cash. And it's just really a mindset. You can overcome it, but there are people who feel like they want to give to capital campaigns, to build a building, to get a roof so that they can see it with their eyes instead of, feel it. Just depends. And the reason that we bring all these up is that if, you're going to have all kinds of people that are your donors and you would appeal to them in different ways. If I'm a numbers person, I might want to see your budget. If I love kids, I might want to talk, to you about how you've made a difference in kids' lives, those kinds of things. People are different. I've never been the type of person who could stand up in front of a group and make people cry. I've worked You know, I've worked with fire victims that have lost everything they own, right? Flood victims, they've lost everything, including their dog, their car. I mean, they're left with nothing. But I've never, and I feel it deep inside, but I'm not the kind of person who can stand up in front of a group and really do the tearjerker thing. But there's somebody in your organization that probably can, that's good at that, right? So you keep in mind the different types, different ways, what you do appeals to people. And you know, you all are doing things that affect people's lives very seriously. You're solving problems that, you know, businesses can't solve, society hasn't been able to solve. And so don't ever hang your head. Don't feel like you're manipulating. You're just relating to people at their level, right? It's okay to show numbers to a number person. It might turn them off if you try to make them cry, right? You don't want to do that. But there's all different kinds of people in the world. A blended campaign is like a blended gift. You may want to talk to your donors about a gift now and a gift later in their will or estate. It's good to plant those seeds, but I would say that's more of an advanced project. Once you get your general fundraising going and it's going well, then you need to start thinking about planned gifts. I do have a workshop on that. The average planned gift is about 75,000. So it's big chunks of money, right? Takes a while to cultivate, but it's worth it in the long run. And then the 80-20 rule. Has anybody ever heard of that?
70-30.
You're probably thinking about well,
Split with other nonprofit, the legal split.
You're talking about Pareto's law. That's 80-20.
80% of your money is going to come from 20% of your donors.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that I think is the next slide.
Okay.
But there's you can categorize people into 4 different groups. People that have a lot of money, high capacity to give, but either are not really charitably minded or don't like your nonprofit for some reason. It happens. They brought their dog to your shelter and it got euthanized when they thought it should be adopted, you know, who knows? They might not like you, but they have money to give, but they are not charitably minded toward you. There's high capacity and high propensity. They have a lot of money and they like to give, or they've given to you before. So that's your very important category there, top right. Bottom right is, I don't have a lot of money, but I love your organization. That might be a prospect for a planned gift. I'll give you a little taste of that. The gifts that you give to annual campaigns come out of your checking account, right? Your cash. Planned gifts come out of your assets. I'm going to give the leftover retirement when I die. Whatever's left, I give to you. My house, my car, things that I don't need after I die. So the low capacity can be a good prospect for a planned gift if the person has assets like a home or retirement stock. Some people want to hang on to their stock in case they get sick when they're older. And so then they'll just do the beneficiary, and it's very easy for nonprofits to get stock. Very popular gift. Because even if I've had the stock for 30 years, my deduction or the deduction for my estate is the present day value. So, you know, people bought Coca-Cola stock, you know, Pizza Hut stock, whatever, it's worth a bunch today. Their deduction is today's value. So don't discount people that you think have low capacity. I had a guy that would donate blood when I worked for the Red Cross. He never gave us a penny. All he did was donate blood. He hadn't been to the barber or the dentist in a really long time, and he looked kind of scraggly, and he drove an old truck. But he was retired from the Whirlpool Corporation. And when he died, he gave a $200,000 gift. So he would have been, you'd think, in the low capacity, but he loved the Red Cross. He was a faithful blood donor for decades. So when you pass, your propensity might be different. Lower left is people that don't have any money and don't give and don't like your organization. Forget them. Don't try to convince them. You know what I mean? Try to categorize your people that you know and that you want to fundraise from into one of these categories and spend most of your time on the right-hand side. Because this person, and this happens with like friends, if they have friends that have more money than them, they might bring them into the fold, right? Or they might be willing to go out and talk to people for you. You just never know. So stick to the right side of the screen. Here's the 80-20. This is a sample that, you know, it's pretty easy to figure out. But I do suggest that when you make a plan, you know, you want to raise $10,000 or whatever it is. Try to break it up into categories. If you can look at local income, you know, there are statistics as to what the average income is in a certain town or a county. You can look that up. There's it's called the MAP online. The University of Arizona and the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona maintain this database. And it's pretty good. You can go in by county and you can see where people work and what the average income is, excuse me, and that sort of thing. To sort of give yourself an idea where you're going to be at with this chart. But it also helps you assign different people to different forms of asks. You know, who knows people in town that have more money and is willing to go to them to make the ask? Who's fine walking around an event asking for $5, $10? You know, the people that like fire departments circulate the boot. That's where you're getting a lot of $5 bills, $10 bills, singles, that kind of thing. Different people are willing to do different types of asking. And it is a numbers game. If you want a $1,000 gift, you're probably going to have to ask at least 4 people. And you don't have to feel weird if somebody says no. You asked and you did your duty, and if they say no, you move on. You don't take it personally. You never know what's going on in people's lives. Who's lost a job, who's had a cancer diagnosis, you know, you just don't know. So none of it's personal. But you can make charts like this and be organized about it. And, you know, it helps you for subsequent years too. If you know it took 100 asks to get to $10,000, then when you're planning for next year, you can say, okay, we're going to have to make 100 asks, and how many people do we need to do that, and how are we going to go about it? But if you're tracking what your average gift is, are you getting a bunch of $20 checks? Are you getting a few $100 checks? Then you kind of know how to plug, you know, what your average gift is into this chart. You know, if you get a lot of $100 gifts, then maybe your bottom numbers are bigger than your top. Not personal. It's a numbers game. And you can hold your head high for what you're doing in the community. And find different ways to make asks, but keep at it. If you don't ask me, I'm not going to give. I'm going to fall off those rolls. You saw at the beginning, 65% of people drop off after the first year. The IRS only requires a formal tax letter if the gift is $250 or more. I would say write everybody a thank you note. They might not need the tax acknowledgement letter, but for what are stamps now, 50 cents? They just went up. 78 cents. Maybe that's what the person that doesn't want to ask for money does. They write the thank you notes. Great job for board members. If it's confidential, then you need to figure out who's gonna do the confidential part. Some folks are better. You know, if I want to make an anonymous gift, or I don't want anybody to tell you to tell anybody that I gave you $500, because then everybody in town's gonna ask me. You gotta keep those confidentialities. I know of numerous times nonprofits in Southeast Arizona, one accidentally published a donor's name in a Christmas thank you newsletter. Donor's angry, said, I'm not giving you any more money. Another woman gave a gift when she passed. She happened to tell someone she worked with. It was a very large gift. Took a while, but a few years after she died, the friend told someone who told someone. And the nonprofit got wind of it, and they wanted to put her name on the side of the building because it was a really big gift. The daughters found out, and they were angry. My mom never wanted her name on anything. And so they lost a donor because of that. So confidentialities, I talked about this in board governance if you were here. If it's confidential, don't tell anybody. If your spouse has loose lips, don't tell your spouse. It can cost you dearly in the long run. People get mad about stuff like that. If any of you are new, this is a national average. Yours might be different. Depending on if you can get paper letterhead donated, or sometimes businesses will let you run through their postage machine. I mean, there's different ways to try to save money on this. But $1.50 per dollar, because you got to print materials usually, or you got to create a website or a web page or link it. You know, there are just different costs associated with starting a campaign. You need photos, you need high res photos so that they look good online or look good in your printed materials. There's always, you have any idea, Chris, on your startup costs for fundraising?
No, it's probably too low because we don't invest very much at all in it.
Okay. If you're gonna track, you do need to invest. You can send an email, but you're not gonna go to your sent folder and, you know, make hash marks on how many you sent. There are various services that have free email, but it's generally not worth it. TechSoup, I told you guys about TechSoup. You don't remember TechSoup? TechSoup is a website where nonprofits can buy software for cheap. Yes. Yes, and even,
Sure.
yes, even organizations like the Arizona Community Foundation that has over $1 billion shops at TechSoup. So you don't, you know, schools know about TechSoup. But it is definitely a place to look for software, and it changes from time to time. They have various deals that go on. But for nonprofits, buy from TechSoup when you can. One of the caveats is that it's tied to an email address. So if you have a volunteer, and this happened, that's how I know about it. You had a volunteer sign them up for TechSoup. They bought some stuff. They didn't need any more stuff for 2 or 3 years. The volunteer passed away. They had an extremely difficult time transferring the TechSoup account to someone on their board who was still alive, because the person that passed didn't do it. So that's an issue with TechSoup. So do it info@regenerating-Sonora or whatever general email you have. Maybe it's a position instead of a person's personal email. I don't know if your church or whoever has contact us at yahoo.com or whatever, so that different people can access it. And save your passwords. I was part of a Rotary Club, and they're not tax exempt, but they still fundraise. They just don't, their donors don't get the tax benefit. We'd had the same treasurer for about 12 years. He was using Quicken, not QuickBooks, so kind of out of date. He had a stroke. The password was not written down. We could not, his son tried, everybody tried. We lost our records. There were a few printed reports, but what they printed for board meetings wasn't the detail of who gave the money, it was just a total. Money for fireworks, money for textbooks, whatever it was, but didn't say who, because the board didn't review all that. If you have stuff on people's personal computers, back it up, share it. Don't let that happen, because I've seen it happen. You spill a cup of coffee on your computer. You can fry it if it's not backed up or in the cloud. The cloud is great for preventing that, but there are a lot of nonprofits that are not in the cloud. It's $30 a month. Is that about right? To use like QuickBooks online and some of the others. It's like, yeah, they don't want to spend the money.
Bumping the prices up, but it's worth it.
Yes, it is worth it. I would say it is worth it. Definitely. Over time, you can get that cost per dollar raised down. And a great way to do it is to have your board members or volunteers do it with someone over coffee. And hopefully the volunteer buys the coffee and the pastry. And there's no cost for the ask, right? You have a conversation. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're excited about. Would you like to be part of it? How can you help? Different things. So you can lower it by getting the in-kind, like you were talking about, when somebody buys lunch or has someone over for dinner. I love the little intimate house parties where you have 10 to 15 people max. Someone that has donated to your organization just gets up. There's no real agenda. Have some wine, have some cheese, the hosts serve it, beer, whatever. And they say, you know what? I'm so glad to be here tonight because I love Regenerating Sonora. I have seen the difference it's making with kids and folks in town. And I have put them in my will. And I'm so excited about it. And I hope, here's how I did it. I had this stock or I had this annuity. I have my, IRA, whatever. And it gets people thinking about the future. You don't ask at the time. You just share. Share some stories, share what the person did. And it starts those wheels turning in other people's minds. It's real low key, no pressure at all. But it plants the seed. And you got to plant seeds for things to grow. You know this from your front window. You constantly plant seeds. Some grow a little and die off, same as the donor that lapses, right? Some take longer to germinate. I told you it took me 5 years working with a woman to get the $10 million gift. But it was so worth it, right? So worth it. So those of you who are spreadsheet whizzes, this is a spreadsheet where someone has tracked, and I have this spreadsheet with the formulas in it if you want. But it goes through the costs of everything they're doing. Now, this is technical. You might not do this the first few years, but you can create a spreadsheet like this, and it tells you the total amount you raise, the cost of your staff time, if you have paid staff. I know most of you don't. Other associated costs, what you netted, and then the cost of fundraising in that last column. And then in the bottom, it says the top 5 sources of revenue. So it helps you understand where your money is coming from. Now, if you get a big grant, that's a 2-year grant, it'll throw the numbers off. But generally speaking, for raising money from individuals, this is a great spreadsheet to use. And I'm happy to share it. And it's partly color coded. I love color coding things. It helps me. I'm a visual person that way. And I like, purple, green, yellow, so that in my mind, when I see the color, I know what it means. It's just, you may have a different way, like bolding certain things or whatever works for you. But I like color. Oh, I've had people ask me about buying lists, and you can buy lists. You probably got address labels in the mail from St. Jude or somebody like that. You've never given to St. Jude, but they got your name off a list. They bought a list. I feel like it's impersonal and it's sort of a last resort. But if no one's been tracking who's been giving and you're starting from scratch, you can buy a list. And there are decent sources of lists in Arizona. U of A's got a list. La Baz, Arizona. Look, I didn't find any not in Tucson or Phoenix. They run from $1,500 to $3,500. And what you get to do is use the list one time. And you're breaking federal law if you keep using it. I'm just telling you, FCC, there are rules on fundraising, especially if you don't go out of state. Certain states require a permit to send mail to their state. If you're doing fundraising, you need to find out what state you're in and whether you can cold mail them. If they're already a donor, if they're already part of your organization, that doesn't apply. Like, here, some people go to Colorado for the summer or Washington State, or they go back to Wisconsin or whatever. If they're part of your donor base, you don't need the permit. It's just a seasonal address thing. But to solicit somebody from the first time, this would apply more like in northern Arizona, where you're right on the border and you have people that shop from both states. I mean, here you're kind of in the middle of the state. You may have a few winter residents or what have you, but on border areas where I worked for the Red Cross, we were on the border of Indiana. And all the TV was out of Indiana, and there's a lot of stuff in Indiana, so we cross state lines. But so those are the rules. I just wanted to make you aware of what's out there in Tucson. Not my favorite way to do things, but if you got nothing else, maybe start there. And you get to keep the names that reply to you or reach out to you. You can use those again. If somebody sends you a $10 check, they're yours. So, and they do work. Okay. This will be overwhelming. Start small, name, address. Never put the salutation in with the first name. In other words, you need the Mr., Miss, Ms., Mrs. separate from their name because you're going to use the data different ways. If you want to say, Ms. is a column, Angie's a column, Laskarides is a column, my street address is a column, my town is a column, my state is a column, my zip code is a column. Because if you're doing an event or something that relates to where I live, like Vail, or it could be Winkleman, or, you're going to want to be able to sort by that. And then when you put my name in the body of the letter, you don't want it to say Ms. Angie every time. We were in the South, that might work, as you well know, because they speak that way to each other. They say Ms. Paula, Ms. Susan, that's just the way they talk, but not here. We're in the South, but I mean East. Virginia, Georgia, Carolinas, Deep South, there you go, perfect. And I have had to go through lists and separate them out. When there's 700 people on a list, it's a pain, right? So set it up separately the first time. You can always add the fields in when you merge, but you can't take them out if the data's in the field. So I like the numbers of donors who increase their giving because this is really important long-term. I think I have the chart in here, but I want everybody to make a chart of all your donors and what events they come to and how many times a year they give. Because the more boxes people check, they're coming to your events, they're giving you money, they came to a lecture, whatever it is, the more boxes that are checked, the more likely it is that they'll give you a gift in their will or their estate. Even if they just give you a painting or, something they have of value. So to know how many times you're touching someone is really important for this. So I know this is a lot, but it's a goal. This is, your long-term goal. And I'm gonna email the slides. I see somebody, taking notes. But, okay. Public narrative is storytelling. What is the story that you tell about yourself and your organization to stimulate giving, volunteering, interaction, all of these things? And I've done it for myself, and it's really made a difference for me. Because if you're talking to me about giving to your organization, I'm going to have questions. Well, why are you involved? Why do you like this organization? How does it touch your heart, or how does it make a difference? And as I said in the beginning, I have worked in nonprofits for over 30 years, and that's a really long time. So when I first read this, I wanted to go through and figure out why do I do what I do? And I said, well, I knew when I went to college, I majored in public administration, so I knew by the time I got to college. So what made me decide before I went to college that that's what I wanted to do? And I had to think about it for a while, a few days. And then I remembered, when I was growing up, I lived in Athens, Greece. My dad was teaching at Athens College. And he's Greek, so made sense, right? But in the summer, he wasn't teaching. So we would pile into the Simca, which was a dinky little car, right? And I get car sick, so there's another whole story to tell there. But they took us to like 13 different countries in Europe, including Germany. And they took us to Dachau concentration camp, former, and Auschwitz, former concentration camp. And has anybody ever been there? You bet. Well, they have panels that are this tall that show photos of horrible things. And this is probably, I'm already getting goosebumps, the thing. I mean, I was a kid, I was probably in 5th grade, but it just floored me to think that an organized government did that to people because of their heritage, their religion. And keep in mind, there's like 12 million Jews were killed, but 1 million Greeks were killed too. So it was people from my heritage because we're dark and swarthy and less than, right? The Aryan nation. So there were not just the bodies, but the piles of glasses. They kept their glasses. They kept their combs for their hair. There's piles of combs that look like snowdrifts. I mean, it was horrible. And it really made me sick to my stomach when I was there, and it stayed with me for days. And I got angry and I was upset and I was crying, but I thought, I never, ever want that to happen again. And I want to make sure, I want to be part of what prevents that from ever happening again. And so working in government, I thought I would have the ability to stop it if it happened again. And so for me, it goes all the way back to 5th grade. And I volunteer sang in a barbershop quartet, and I did volunteer work, and I wanted to be involved in community and help people get to know each other. That one-on-one is what prevents hatred against people of color or people's religion or all those things. So I've always, in my whole career, worked to bring people together and to build community and build capacity, because I know the horrors of what happens when people are separated and they hate each other and that sort of thing. So for me, the nonprofit world came naturally because of that. people that can't speak for themselves, people that are marginalized, underrepresented. I mean, it just really, I'm big on social justice, man. That's me. For some people, it's animals, others it's education. I know a man who, was a terrific fundraiser for a school foundation. And the first thing when people asked him what his story was, why are you doing this? He would say, well, I grew up poor. And that was a great way to start the conversation. He said his education is what changed his life. And so he wanted to raise money so kids could go to college and change their lives. And that's how he told his story. How you connect that, and yours has to do with your hometown, right? Wanting to change things in your hometown. Anybody else thought about that and why you do what you do? Is it a brother or sister or family member? There's all kinds of things. For you?
My social, the same way as your social justice. I think I talked a little bit about it. I started in South Carolina in 2012. And I knew something was going on with me. And since I've moved here, I've completed, I was one of the Boy Scouts of America, one of those victims. So when you saw that justice when you were like five, I think I was like 7 or whatever, and I was going through this. Well, my whole life I've been a Green Beret. I went to the military, federal law enforcement, and I thought I was gonna fix things. And I went through my whole life doing all of this. And then there were people, psychologists in the military that would sit here and try to bring these things I had suppressed up, and I just wouldn't do it because the mission was to continue on the mission to kill the bad guys. Well, when I started this lawsuit, which is I'm owed monies, and it's the largest lawsuit in history, not American history, but in history of victims. 86, there was 86,000 of us, I think. And since I've been here, I told you I used cannabis, which is what I based my system on. And when I was sitting down for my dissertation about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I had to sit down with it. So because this goes before a trustee and a trustee. This has been before the Supreme Court, so and it's still ongoing. So, and I got these things out, but in any other situation, I wouldn't be able to sit with a person on the phone. If I was in my hometown of South Carolina, where my abusers are at, I wouldn't be able to sit here and have this medication and be not traumatized enough to be able to get through it. And I really haven't done anything with my company since 2012. I've made zero, no doubts. But now I'm owed monies through this. So I want to get out there with my organization and make sure what happened to me and all these other children, it never happens again, through my story and education to how we can stop it. Because even though we're still in this lawsuit and we're going to get money, they're not dealing with our abuse. So there's going to have to be other organizations to step up and shut our abusers down who are making money off modern day slavery off children. So, yeah, that's kind of but that's a lot to put on you guys, but I've just been able to get through this myself.
Thank you for sharing.
Yes. And I understand 1 in 4 children are sexually abused in some way, shape, or form. So if you look at how many people are in this room, it's happened. And I know people that it's happened to too. So once you know in your heart why you do what you do and why you support your organization, you want to connect to shared values with your donors. It may be a value of the military, in your case, your fellow folks in the military. It may be, was it in the Catholic Church?
No, Boy Scouts.
Oh, Boy Scout, you're right, I'm sorry.
And then later on, the Catholic Church got me, because when we want to talk about
Mhm.
the systematic of abuse, there's a lot of money in this world, and you have certain bloodlines. There's people can't wait. It's called a honeypot. They can't wait to get a hold of it. To do what? To maybe drug you, abuse you, all this other stuff. But to break free, and we broke free from this as kids. I actually started a gang I mean, I had suppressed this because I rebelled. I started a gang at I took my Boy Scout uniform and I tore the sleeves out. I put skulls and crossbones on it. And in numbers, you're stronger. So I had a really good idea a little as a young guy how not to be abused again. But like I said, I had forgotten a lot of that stuff earlier. So.
So the key here is to develop a short, not a speech, but to share your story and tie it to your nonprofit, to share the values. None of us want children to be victims of things like that. None of us want folks of a certain religion to be persecuted, hopefully. But the key part of how you tie this to fundraising is you say, this is what motivated me to do what I do. I hope you feel the same way. You try to connect with people on shared values and get them excited about taking part. Like at the library, reading. If you can read, you can learn so much. No one can stop you because you can read it. You can find it, you can read it. You want to be an engineer, you can read it. Space. I mean, I'm amazed at the stuff that I read about. I'm a plant nerd and I go to U of A and I read and read and read about plants and growing in the desert and, you know, the mycelium under the desert soil and how creosotes poison other creosotes and other plants. And I mean, it blows my mind, the things that I don't know. So reading and how to get people excited about reading and help the library. Yeah, and regenerating Sonora. Chris, I think you're really good at this, but your personal story, you're not a paid staff member, you know, we're doing this because it's part of our souls. And so to connect with the value systems of others and get them excited about coming on board is really important to your public narrative. It needs to be short. You have to talk about, one, your personal experience, the shared values, why it's important that someone acts on those shared values, and why it's important that they act now. Sometimes you don't get a gift for a while, but in general, if somebody asks you what you do in an elevator or at an event, you need a 3 minutes of how you can say how you got here, why you're here, and to ask someone to join you. And that is the key part. You don't necessarily have to ask for money. If it's a shelter, they could come and pet the pets or, you know, pick up poop or whatever it is that is helpful. You can use it for fundraising, but sometimes just bringing someone into the fold gets them started. I rarely ask for money. Rarely. I don't say, will you write me a check for $1,000? I don't do that. Statistics show that if you let the donor select the amount, you're going to get more money than what you would normally ask for. You're going to ask me for 100 when I would have wrote you a check for 5. Because you don't know how much I have in the bank. You can't tell. It's like that guy that was not well kept and was kind of dirty and stuff, but he had 200 grand to give, right? I mean, you just don't know what's in my bank account. So it's about the common values that we share. And also, you know, the urgent need. What is the need? What's so important about that? Because kids without being literate, you know, statistically will not do as well during their life. Or kids that are abused will suffer PTSD for the rest of their life. You know, or nonprofits for me that don't know how to raise money. You know, they have great causes, great purpose, but if they don't know how to raise money, they're going to suffer and then their community suffers. So don't be afraid to tell your story. It's got to be short. We've all backed away from someone who is going on and on and on and on, right? We've all done that. Short and sweet. Give out your information, ask for their information, just invite them to an event, low pressure, get them excited, and they will come to you. I've seen it again and again and again.
I remember, Angie, when I was asking you about this once, you talked about your personal narrative, then this is why we're now working on this. This is why I'm with this organization. and then here's what we've accomplished so far, and here's what we're looking to do with your help. It's like, if I kind of remember basically what the structure of that was.
Yes, and it's more about vision. You can say we're gonna give away 100 meals, but that doesn't tell the story of families and kids who are hungry. There's a woman who has an organization called Tooth Buds. She's expanding into this area. She was a dental hygienist. She happened to go to a convention where she learned about kids that go to bed with tooth pain. And that tooth pain is often the gateway to them starting to use drugs because they're in pain. They try to find something for their tooth pain in their parents' medicine cabinet, right? And she was like, oh my God, what would prompt a kid, you know? So she started a nonprofit that goes into the schools and sees kids that don't go to the dentist and does a whole bunch of things, including stopping tooth decay. But for her, the moment was that kids in the up to the 5th grade have never been to the dentist. And they have tooth pain, and that broke her heart. And so that's why she started what she's doing. And she's helping over 6,000 kids a year. It's amazing what she's doing. And I had no idea. She knows all the statistics by county of how many dentists, like in Greenlee County, there's a dentist now. But for about 10 years, there was no dentist and no dental hygienist in Greenlee County. They had to drive to Safford an hour away to go to the dentist. Can you imagine? If you're an hourly worker, that means you're missing at least half a day's work to go to the dentist. That shouldn't be, right? But I didn't know. There's all kinds of stories like that. You know, when you get out of jail, where's the nearest halfway house? I had a guy that was doing transportation from jail to halfway houses. I started making calls where there were transportation services and stuff. It was like almost $400 to get from the county jails to the halfway houses. And when you get out of prison, you're not given that money. And if you hitchhike, you get arrested and you go back to jail. I mean, there's stories out there. You just got to tell them. And people will give you the money. You are doing wonderful things. You have nothing to be embarrassed about. This is important stuff. This is humanity, right? You're working on saving and improving quality of life for your community or kids or whatever it is. And it's why I'm here. I'm not getting paid today. I'm, donating my time and my gas and stuff because I believe in what you guys are doing. And I've seen the changes here in Superior. It's wonderful. I'm so happy about it. I found my favorite mural today. It's with the wolves and the pigs on the purple. That, what's the name of the street? Kelman. Yeah, that's my favorite mural.
I've seen the new one, right? It's just not all who won.
Wander are lost. I saw that
I
too.
love that.
I saw that too. And I love what Chris is doing here for regenerating, so. I'm gonna send the slides, well, you have the slides. So you may share them.
Yeah, I'll share them with everyone here. If you have time for any open discussion or
Yes,
questions,
I'm
then
good.
what we'll do is we'll formally close right now and thank everyone for coming. You know, we're all busy and we all chose to be here. And
Thank you for
we
coming.
appreciate the fact that Angie, that you came. So another round of applause for Angie. Thank you for your information. Very helpful. And we all have homework now, which is a good thing. So if you gotta go, then thank you for coming. And if you want to stay and ask Angie questions about what's been covered, then thank you for staying for a little bit longer to do that. So
Yep, and we can do that confidentiality if need be.
I'll turn the.
Okay. Terrific.
I'd love to stay, but I know shower.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
I won't be in trouble.
Oh, good. You helped me today, so I really appreciate that. Yeah.
I was gonna call my Greek buddy before I